Hey everyone, it's Lindsay here. Thanks again for joining me on another episode of Courage Class. Hey, can you do me a favor? After you finish listening to today's episode, can you like, subscribe, and even share the episode with a friend? Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to listen. It brings me so much joy to be able to bring these incredible conversations and to share it with you every single week. So thanks so much. Welcome to Courage Class. I'm Dr. Lindsay Kwok Hugh, and each week I'm in conversation with our community's changemakers and trailblazers. Together, we explore the unspoken parts of our Asian and Western experiences, finding strength, growth, and healing that reflect who we truly are, not who we've been told to be. I'm so glad you're here. Class is now in session. I am so excited about today's guests. Today we're speaking with Dr. Tamsin Lee. She's a doctor of East Asian medicine, a Taoist metaphysics practitioner, co-host of the podcast Beauty is a Birthright, and a health justice published researcher who went viral on TikTok for reframing perimenopause and menopause as what East Asian medicine calls the second spring, a season of power, wisdom, and self-trust. With over 16,000 followers, her message gives us permission to stop pathologizing midlife and to start creating from it. And this isn't about disappearing. Oh no, we're not going anywhere, world. It's about beginning again. So here's my conversation with Dr. Tamsin Lee. You have been such a source of inspiration and power and empowerment. I mean, you just embody all of what it means to be a powerfully, wonderfully strong and confident Asian woman.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to talk more about this. It's just always nice to know because when I'm sharing this work, I'm wondering, is this just me? Am I the only one that's thinking about this? So it really nourishes me to know that there are more people like us out here who are curious.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely so many of us. But Tamsin, I want to first dive into some of the general tenets of East Asian medicine and how it works for some of our listeners who may not be as familiar. Would you talk about the key components to this type of medicine?
Yes. So when I talk about East Asian medicine, it derives from China, but it expanded to Korea and Japan, Vietnam, and other countries. But the root of it is Chinese medicine. And there are three philosophies that go under Chinese medicine, but Taoism is one of the most foundational philosophies that is the cornerstone of how we practice this medicine. The clearest way to talk about this is really from a simple concept of yin and yang. I think the way that we're taught about these two concepts, it's very binary when it's actually incredibly multidimensional. So yin and yang has four main tenets of this concept. So these aren't abstract ideas. They exist in everything. They exist in nature. They exist in the relationships we have with people. They exist in the way that we age. Everything goes back to yin and yang concept. And the four ideas of yin and yang is one, they're in opposition, meaning that yin and yang are fundamentally opposed. They represent contrasting qualities like darkness, light, day, nighttime, cold, heat. The second thing is that they're interdependent, meaning that neither yin nor yang can exist in isolation. So they actually require each other for definition and function. And so an example of this is we have no idea what darkness would look like if we didn't have light as a contrast, and vice versa. Right?
Yes.
So we don't know what getting old means if we've never been young before. Right. So there is this interdependent concept. The other one is counterbalance, meaning that yin and yang exist in this dynamic balance, that it's constantly shifting and influencing each other. So as one increases, the other decreases.
Okay.
And so it's never stagnant. It's in this constant state of motion.
Okay.
And then the last one is really important. It's intertransformation, And that means yin and yang can transform into each other under certain conditions. And this highlights that dynamic nature of force. And this means what's currently yin can turn into yang. And we see that every day, actually. We see it when the sun rises and the sun sets, and then moon rises and the moon sets. It transforms into one another. And so we see that in every aspect of life with what happens in our body, the relationships we have, like I said, how we age. And so this fundamental concept of yin and yang is so important. And so much of the medicine goes back to that.
Okay. Thank you so much for that very in-depth explanation. I really appreciate especially the concrete examples of the sun rising and the sun also setting, illustrate the general principles of East Asian medicine. Now, this is something that you didn't just study at a doctoral level, like you have lived it. And one of the things that I just love hearing from people is, how did you even get into East Asian medicine? And, I will give, our listeners sort of a preview. I was looking at, when I was preparing for this, I was looking at your website and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, like she went and she traveled for, 2 years. Like it was incredible, the journey that you took to really embody, live, and breathe this practice.
Yeah. I think when you find your calling, it never comes easily. At least it didn't for me. I resisted all of this. I went in kicking and screaming. This is not what I wanted to do with my life. And I tried avoiding it everywhere I could. I mean, I traveled to the other part of the world for 2 years backpacking. And this is before what we see influencers doing today. Like there was no Wi-Fi, there were no paved roads, just so I could run away from this. But that is the power of this medicine that's so alive, and it's so much bigger than just herbs and acupuncture. It's something that's cosmically happening that continues to call you back. And so I'm Korean. I grew up with Korean medicine. I grew up taking Korean herbs when I was a kid. I grew up going to the acupuncture with my aunties and getting cupping, and my grandma did acupuncture. But as an Asian American growing up in the US, being born here, but my parents are immigrants, there was so much of my culture that I wanted to deny and assimilate into white culture. Right. So a lot of it I denied. And so much of our culture, this yin and yang concept isn't everywhere in our culture, even in the food that we eat, right? There are certain warm foods that we eat, and cool foods that we eat together, and certain foods that we eat during the season that is naturally in the way that we live. I lived in New York. That's where I'm from originally. And I worked in real estate. I worked in nightclubs for so long. I was a journalist. And then in 2007, I woke up paralyzed from my waist down. And for a month and a half, I had experienced paresthesia, which is kind of like pins and needles down my legs. And, I would tell my boyfriend, like, it's weird. I'm feeling numb, but then I wake up the next day and be fine. And then this one day I just woke up paralyzed. Wow. And I didn't have health insurance at the time. And so I ended up going back home to my parents, and they suggested going to see an acupuncturist. And I was so desperate. And I went to see an acupuncturist, and he's this old Korean man practicing out of his house. And I went to see him 3 times a week, and I was on herbs. And by the second week, I could walk again. Barely. I needed help. And then the end of the month, I was able to walk on my own.
Wow.
But when you lose such an innate ability to walk, it really humbles you, because you can't do anything. You can't go to the bathroom yourself. You can't get something to eat. And it really woke me up. And it forced me to think, like, how did I get here? And how do I prevent this from happening again? So then I went traveling for 2 years. Then I came back and I worked as a travel journalist for a while, and I decided I'm going to study nutrition. And at the time, the acupuncturist, the older man, he was going to write a book and he needed help translating. And so I was reading his manuscript and talking about yin and yang concept and the 5 elements. And I had no idea what any of this meant. And it started me on this path to figuring out, okay, I want to study this medicine, not because I wanted to help people. That was never my reason. It was really to figure out how to help myself. What happened to me? how do I prevent it from happening ever again? I'm so blessed and grateful that I've managed to create an incredible career that is unique outside of my field. I do work in health justice. I am a published public health researcher.
Mhm.
I teach in an academic university that isn't associated with East Asian medicine. I work with PhD students, and then I get to share this medicine.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting to see how, when you answer your calling, how things start to come together and you end up using everything that you've learned on your journey to create something beautiful. And it's still, to this day, I'm trying to figure out how to help myself. Like,
Mhm.
how do I help myself right
Yeah.
now? And
Yeah.
in that, I get to help other people.
Yeah.
And I think there's something beautiful when I love hearing from my clients where we can connect on a deeper level and understand that we're not so alone in any of this.
I mean, so many powerful components to the story that you just shared. Thank you for sharing that, first of all. What somebody once told me, that you were best positioned to serve the person that you once were. And when I hear you talk about your own personal journey, it makes what you say like even that much more powerful. You're like, oh my gosh, this is something that she's been there, done that, practice, still practicing, like so vulnerable, so open about where she is. And there's a level of deep truth and honesty to how you share your story and what you're doing now for all of us. And really inspiring us to embrace this, and we're going to get into it, into our perimenopausal and our
Yes.
menopausal journey. And so I just want to thank you so much for sharing that, because it's such an important component to learning more, the important work that you do. I'm really curious to know, how have Western systems sort of misunderstood East Asian medicine, especially around menopause?
Yeah, it's it's a big thing.
It's a big
Most
thing. Yeah.
Western trained doctors, even OBGYNs, they
Yeah.
don't have an in-depth training in midlife health issues like
Yeah.
menopause. Um, it's now just being talked about in social media. We know we
Yeah.
never saw this sudden surge and interest of menopause. I've never seen this, right? And so Western medicine has to catch up
Mm,
to what the rest of the world is going through. And a lot of the focus, similar to other health issues with Western medicine, it's typically researched or studied for white women. So
mm.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
information and research on menopause that's lacking in women of color, Asian women.
Okay.
And so the way that Western medicine, it's always been introduced that menopause is, either something to fix it, and I know they don't see it, they don't define it as a pathology, but the way that it's treated, it feels very much like a pathology. Something is wrong, you need to
Yes.
fix it. Whereas Eastern medicine sees it as this natural progression in life. And it's less about fixing and more about accepting and then understanding that your body is going through a natural progression. So that means you need to make changes in your life. You need to
Mm,
make changes in your daily habits, in the way that you live. And that's what's happening to our body. And in the Western concept, it's like, menopause happens and women just disappear. Like, that's the end. Like,
yes,
I don't know where they go. You never hear from them a lot.
totally.
Whereas in Eastern medicine, but also many cultures around the world, I mean, the more that I've been talking about this on social media, I've been hearing women from all different cultures talking about, oh, I grew up with this sort of information too, where there's something incredible that happens to women post menopause,
Oh,
and you gain so much wisdom, and it makes sense why this narrative has been diminished in the Western society,
oh,
right? Because
yeah.
there's nothing more scary and frightening than an older woman with a lot of wisdom and life
Right.
experience.
Absolutely.
Right. And
Absolutely.
so I think that's one of the things that is very different from how we view things. And it's very much about holistic medicine. Eastern medicine is a holistic medicine, meaning that we treat the individual. So not only are we treating their genetic makeup, but also their environmental makeup, their lifestyle history. And that's really important because, like I said, there are certain things with menopausal symptoms that I'll talk about Asian women specifically, that we the research says that we don't tend to experience as intense or that frequent severity of hot flashes. But what we do experience more than other women is joint pain. And so something simple
Interesting.
like that is that if you are Asian, you're not really experiencing that intensive of hot flashes, but you're starting to experience joint pain. You would
Yeah.
never know that that could possibly be due to menopause, because Western medicine tends to see medicine as sort of a one size fits all. And
Mm.
Eastern medicine always looks at the individual at that moment, and then the past, how they've lived their lives, their genetic makeup, their environment, everything.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I'm thinking about right now, this practice of really decolonizing how we think about aging and womanhood in general. Are there any practices that we can do to actively make ourselves more aware of, oh my gosh, like, why am I getting older thinking? Um,
Yeah. I think it's a very personal journey.
mm,
You know, I teach social justice, I teach health justice specifically for the East Asian medicine field. And that has a lot to do with the political history of how East Asian medicine is practiced here in the US. And there is this erasure of Asian
yeah,
people and Asian culture in this field. If you want to decolonize the way that you think about aging and womanhood and menopause, then you need to understand that everything is interconnected. It really goes back to that yin and yang concept,
mm,
right? It's interdependent. So you can't choose to decolonize how you view aging if you don't simultaneously decolonize racism, classism, ableism, capitalism, all of these
it's all
concepts that
interconnected.
exactly
Oh,
all of this is
yeah,
interconnected. And
yeah,
we like to choose certain things that we
yeah,
want to decolonize, but then when it comes to certain privileges, we don't. It's like, oh yes, I'm anti-racist, but I don't want to give up my fancy handbags or
yeah,
and think about class,
right,
right?
right.
But they're all interconnected. And we have to understand that. You can't pick and choose what you want to decolonize.
Mm,
And that, I think, is a very personal journey because it requires you to look really deeply within and reevaluate the privileges and power that you have, and these privileges that you were given because of the system, not because you did anything to have them, to work
I
at
see.
them. Yeah.
I see. I see. It is. It's interconnected, systemic. It touches every aspect of our life. And it almost feels as though it's almost like the air we breathe. It feels it's so deeply rooted inside of us. Just speaking from personal experience, and I feel like I'm just sort of in the beginning of this, the beginning part of this journey of understanding, like, oh, like, what do I really think about aging? And what do I really think about what it means to be a woman and what a mom? And I realized that this has been training that I've undergone from the very beginning. We can probably draw some dots to menopause and capitalism and the patriarchy and all of these systems that influence the way in which we live our lives.
And these are questions that are meant to be coming up at this time in our life. We're in this
Okay.
midlife where we are questioning
Okay.
everything. And so you're on the right track. It's like
Okay.
you're having an existential crisis, like you are
Yes.
aligned.
No, absolutely. I'm like, what in the hell? Like, what's going on? Can we talk about second spring?
Yes.
Talk about second spring and how is it traditionally understood in East Asian medicine? I love hearing you talk about this on TikTok. People are talking a lot about menopause, and it's talked a lot about in the context of hormonal management, which I know is an aspect to the journey. And God, thank God for second spring and and the thinking that is embedded into that.
Sure. I will say I've been loving the response. Of course, I have haters around this concept of second spring, which isn't my concept. It's a
Yeah.
concept that is in Eastern culture.
Mm.
But it's been incredible to hear women and people with uterus come out and say, like, this is something I've always felt like that's what happens. Or I love hearing from women who are way postmenopausal in their 60s and 70s saying,
Yeah.
like, this is it. I'm telling you right now. They're on that side and are like, this is it.
Mm.
And so it validates, this theoretical concept that I've studied all through medical school and that I'm in that transition right now. So
Yeah.
to talk about second spring, I want to talk a little bit about first spring
Okay.
because first spring is really important. And first spring is when we begin our periods, our menstrual cycle, our
Mm.
menarche. That is known as the first spring.
Okay.
And that continues. Second spring is the metaphor of menopause. And it's this concept that at that time, as your bleeding declines, as your menstrual cycle declines, the energy that you've been putting outwards is now meant to be moved inwards.
Mm.
And so you begin to cultivate this energy of fertility inwards, because it's just energy that
Uh,
we work on an energetic level. And so it's your second chance at life. It's your rebirth. It's a recalibration.
uh,
And so, you're older. You have so much more wisdom and life experience. You've gone through things, right? Hopefully, you're a little bit more financially stable. You have some sort of security. Your children are older or they're leaving the house. It's your second chance. And so it's this second opportunity to really live life the way that you want to before this final transition. There's something beautiful that really happens with women that are aligned when they get to this stage. They start to care less about what people think. They become
yeah.
bold, courageous. There's rage, and that rage fuels creativity,
Mm.
vision, service, devotion, all of this. So there's a lot of grief that we go through. But
Mm.
with grief, yes, it's painful. There's loss, there's suffering. But on the other side of that, because we go back to that yin and yang concept, when
Uh,
there's one thing, it turns into something else,
yes.
right? When you experience grief, when you experience loss, like the loss of your menstrual cycle, the loss of youth, the loss of hormones, things like that, it turns into compassion, because you don't know what compassion really feels like unless you've experienced grief. You don't know what suffering feels like unless you experience
Oh, wow.
compassion.
Well, I wanted to ask you then, so it's normal to feel just some I don't
Oh,
want to say negative feelings, but feeling grief, loss, sorrow. It's normal to feel sad during this period.
yes, yes. And I
Okay.
think that's the thing that
It's not positive
many of us,
psychology, like everything's empowered and yes, we're gonna
no,
go change the world.
grief is one of the emotions that in Western culture we don't, or I would say in modern culture,
Yeah,
even Asia right now, we don't know how to deal with grief.
yeah, yes.
Back in the day, there were so many grief rituals and traditions to hold space for people that grieve. But here we don't. And you have to grieve. There is a
Okay,
loss that's happening
okay.
during this transition. And we need to honor that grief. We need to experience it fully to understand. If we just bypass that grief, we're not going to gain the wisdom
God,
that we
that's
need
beautiful.
post menopause. But it's such an
Yeah,
important thing. And so when I talk about second spring, people think like, oh, it's just happiness, like everything is great.
yeah,
No, this transition is challenging. It's
yeah,
an initiation, it's a portal to something deeper that's happening on a spiritual level. And that
yeah.
never comes with ease. Yes, there are moments of joy and laughter and
Okay.
love. You'll experience that, but we can't deny that there will be moments of loneliness, of shame, of guilt, of anger, all of
Yeah.
these challenging emotions. But they're meant to teach us something.
Okay. I'm so grateful to you for normalizing that because I feel as though, and if I just talk about my traditional Chinese culture, you're not supposed to feel these difficult feelings. You're supposed to just keep that, bottle that, and everything's great. Everything's wonderful. And I'm sort of learning just, through my own therapy journey that no, you have to let yourself feel that. And that's what I'm hearing from you. You have to allow yourself to feel these difficult emotions because on the other side of that, is the joy, is maybe the happiness or the exuberance, whatever you're feeling at that moment. But there's another balanced side to it, and it
Yeah.
feels as though it's again drawing from the yin and the yang. So thank you for saying that. Could you share with us how does energy change or move differently during this transition?
Again, it really goes back to the individual. How energy changes within you is going to look very different for me based on how we've lived our lives so far. So, what I do think happens is it's interesting because sometimes I have clients or people on social media that want to know, when exactly does perimenopause start? Like when does it start? How
Mm.
do I know that I'm in perimenopause? And that is a very difficult answer. There are labs that you can take that looks at hormones, the changes, fluctuations in hormones, but even then, it doesn't tell you that much. And that's because, again, it's not a disease. So there is no diagnosis of when the start date or when it actually happens, right? It's a natural progression, and that happens very
Oh,
at different times in all of us. And so what I think happens is that I think on a spirit level, we begin to feel these shifts that are happening. But because we live in this chaotic modern world, we don't quite click that there's a shift that's happening until our body feels a shift. And that body shift typically manifests as some sort of pain or discomfort.
Okay.
And then we're like, oh, something's happening. But I don't think it happened like the day before. I think it was happening months or years before,
Oh, I
slowly,
see.
progressively. Right.
Okay.
And so that's why it's so important to understand what your body is feeling and be embodied, especially when we are working with healthcare practitioners who many of them are not trained in how to help women during menopause. And so you need to really understand, how do your symptoms manifest? Because
Mm.
how hot flashes look to you is going to look very different to somebody else. And medical practitioners, many of them won't even ask further questions. They'll just say, oh, hot flash. But in Eastern medicine, we really want to know, when does it start, when does it end, how does it last, where does it occur in your body? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it down in your belly and it rises up? Do you feel it more at nighttime, daytime? And these are things that you want to start noting, because you need to become, unfortunately, fortunately, you need to become an advocate for your own health.
Yeah.
And you need to come into these appointments understanding your symptoms. The more that we practice embodiment, we're able to sit in that discomfort and
Mm.
at least not have it overwhelm us,
So
so that we can understand how to speak and communicate about our bodies.
absolutely. So it sounds as though the symptoms that, like a hot flash, for example, this is more of a message, like information for you, as opposed to a symptom to be managed, which feels like two distinct practices. Would you say that East Asian medicine is more on the side of, listen, it's information, it's data for you to consider, a change in your body or a change in your career, your routine, or what have you, but it's information as opposed to a symptom, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, it is a symptom,
Mm,
and but when we just look at it in a binary way, that it's just a symptom, that it
yeah,
needs to be fixed, then
yeah.
we can't understand the depth of that message. What's the deeper meaning behind the
Okay.
symptom? And that's what I love about Eastern medicine, that we see everything that the body tries to tell us in different ways, that it is a message. So yes, maybe you need hormone therapy, and maybe you will also need to look at that you're working too much. Maybe there are a lack of boundaries that you
Okay.
need to set a little bit stronger. Maybe you're overgiving. Maybe you need to reevaluate your sleep routine. Maybe you need to move more during the day. So it's not one or the other. It's
Okay.
like, it's all encompassing. And I
Okay.
think when you think of these symptoms as messages, it, at least for me, it feels a little bit more empowering. It feels like,
Absolutely.
okay, there's like, I can do something in my daily routines and make little shifts in my
Yeah.
life, and to help support this change that's happening.
Absolutely. It's 1,000% more empowering. I feel as though I can almost take that, what I'm feeling, and redirect it towards something that might be more nourishing
Yeah.
to my life, to my body, to the people around me. And that is distinctly different than saying, oh, you're going to have to take these pills and spend this money, or fix this about yourself.
Right.
Tamsin, if I were a client of yours, how would you recommend to me to listen to that messaging? And how do I make those shifts into directing it towards something more positive and empowering in my own life?
I think the one thing that I try to remind people is, stop comparing yourself to other
Oh,
people
okay.
and other people's journey and other
Okay.
people's symptoms,
Wow. Yeah.
and start to get curious about your own journey. There's so much information nowadays on social media,
Yeah.
especially health advice and wellness advice and from doctors. I think we're living in a time where there's too much information. So we
Okay.
start chasing things, and it's chaotic. And the more we chase, the more disconnected we become from our own body.
Mm,
And so we don't understand what's happening in our body, because we're listening to other people and we're not listening to ourselves.
yeah.
But I would say that's the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing is to break free from this binary way of thinking about health and wellness and life, that it is multidimensional, multifaceted. It's always in shift and changing. It's not so black and white. Like in a simple emotional context, like you can feel frustrated at somebody you love and yet still love them at the same time.
Mm,
Right. So we know things aren't so simple. And life would be so boring if it was. What
yeah.
makes life so beautiful is the complexity of it. And I think the last thing that I try to remind people is to cultivate sensuality. And by sensuality, I just mean awaken your senses.
Okay.
Begin to awaken smell, taste, touch, sight, hearing, like all of this, and start to slowly awaken it in the ways that you love to, experience life. And it doesn't have to be a deep meditative practice. It could be listening to your favorite song or smelling something that reminds you of a favorite time in the past. And when you start to slowly awaken your senses, this is a practice of embodiment. You
Yeah.
start to understand what your body feels. And that is unique because our senses are so unique.
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard you say so many times on this that this is really an individual journey. This is not a
Yeah.
one size fits all. There's not one blanket piece of advice that I'm going to give one person because it really is contingent on their life and their journey. The other thing I feel like I hear you saying is to really become more attuned to listening to your body. And I'm going to speak for myself, and maybe I speak for a couple of others who are listening to this, but I think generally we've been trained to not listen. Like it's just like go, 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 hustle, 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 get to the next goal. I mean, I think of in my own Chinese family, get to the next goal, get to the next achievement, get the next award. So, how do I actually stop, slow down, and really begin listening to the messages that my body is giving me? Do you have any sort of practical tools? Well, all of it's practical, excuse me. Do
Mhm.
you have any tools or strategies or recommendations that you can offer to our audience? Like, how do we just stop and be still?
Yeah, that's the biggest question,
Yeah.
right? It's like, that's what we want to learn. I think for myself, what I've learned through my personal journey
Mm.
is that I've learned that I've been conditioned to disconnect from my body as a way to cope with trauma.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and so at one time, being disconnected from my body has saved me. It helped me get through a traumatic experience. But now that I'm no longer experiencing that trauma, that disconnection still exists.
Mm.
And I think people are always asking me this, and I think, and you see it on social media, there's so many products that are being pushed to help you be more present in life. But it really becomes this just a simple practice. And for me, I can only share how I've done this. And it for me, it's a simple breathing meditation.
Mm.
It's, I think it requires some sort of diligence that you need to practice this, have a routine,
Yeah.
so that you become aware of this. But the main thing about these breathing meditation is when you think about meditation or mindfulness, it's been co-opted. So we think like, oh, meditation, mindfulness, like I'm supposed to feel at peace, I'm supposed to feel at ease. It's an anti-stress tool,
Hmm.
and that's what happens after a meditation practice. But
Yeah.
it's not. When it's simply about being aware that your mind actually jumps from a thought to a thought to a thought to an emotion to a sensation, and it doesn't stop. Right. And so if you notice that your mind is doing that, you've done the first part of the meditation practice, just noticing how your mind just jumps around within 10 seconds. Right. And then the second part is to see if you can bring that awareness back to your breath. So allow it to jump, because that's just what the mind is supposed to do. That's just the natural way of the mind moving. And
Okay.
then bring your awareness back to your breath. And then you'll notice that it'll jump to another thing. It'll jump to the fight that you had with your sister. It'll jump to the thing that you forgot to buy at the grocery store. And then bring it back to the breath and bring it back to the breath. And then try to do this simple practice without any judgment, without making yourself feel bad. Like, I can't believe it's going to this thing again. Or like, why am I thinking about this? That happened 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But just bring it back to the breath, bring it back to the breath. And it's such a simple practice, but that's the thing that's helped me. And when I teach this to PhD students, it's interesting because we'll do a breathing meditation, we'll do a check-in to see what that experience was like. And some people will say like, oh, didn't really work because I couldn't like quiet my brain. I noticed that this thing happened and that thing happened and my shoulder hurt. And
Yeah.
I have to tell them like, you did it.
That's it.
That's
Yeah. I was
what,
just going to say that was the
right.
purpose of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or some other people will experience it and they're like, I feel angrier. Like I feel frustrated. I don't feel calm. I'm like, great. Like that's what you noticed. So you did it.
Yeah.
It's not a practice to feel calm. It's just a practice of awareness, whatever you're feeling at that moment. And are you able to feel that discomfort and bringing your awareness back to your breath over and over again without any judgment, without being hard on
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah. I love how you position that. First of all, it's an accessible tool to all of us to be able to just sort of listen to your breath or to use that method to just create a greater awareness of like what's going on in here. Your brain's jumping from thought to emotion to sensation. First of all, thank you for normalizing that. I can't tell you how many people are, I talk to them about, oh, this meditation. Here's the comparison coming out. I think I was supposed to feel
Yeah.
calm
Yeah.
after this, a certain influencer told me that I'm supposed to feel this way. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is to actually start to notice what's going on right
Yeah.
here. Can you access that awareness through different modalities? Can it be breath work or meditation or hiking or
Oh,
walking by the
yeah.
beach?
A few years ago, when I started, I think my perimenopause is when I experienced my first hot flash.
Yeah.
And there was a shift that was happening in my body. And I just started loving music again. Music was such a big thing in my life when I was a
Mm.
teen, preteen. I
Yeah.
would lock myself in the room and listen to music. And I found myself just putting on these headphones and laying on the floor in my living room and listening to music.
Mm.
And that anything can be a meditative practice. Washing the dishes can be a meditative practice.
Oh.
Holding space and listening to a friend share something vulnerable is a meditative practice.
Oh.
Um, Putting on makeup is a meditative practice. Doing your
Yeah.
skincare routine. We can do
Yeah.
our nightly skincare routine, just like slather on and like do our our 10-step skincare, or we can do it with a little bit of awareness and kindness and feel what it feels like when we touch our face,
Mm.
when we touch the bones, when we touch our flesh, and connect with our breath in that way.
Yeah. There's intention behind that. It almost feels
Yes.
like it's like I'm here to like notice what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm here to be present and to notice and to feel what's going on inside my body and then connecting it back to the energy and this stage of our life. It's like those are all messages that
Hmm.
we can take in and we can choose to direct whatever we're feeling or sensing into action.
Yeah.
Into
And to try to do it without any judgment,
oh,
with a little bit tenderness, with a little bit of
I see.
kindness.
I see. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Tamsin, I'm wondering if we can transition what daily, seasonal, or ancestral rituals can help us navigate second spring with intention.
Yeah, I love ancestral rituals, but a lot of it is tied to the seasons. And East Asian culture, our cultures follow the lunisolar calendar, which is like the moon and the sun calendar. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we came from agricultural societies. And so living with the season is the biggest thing, that not just people who are entering second spring, but
Okay.
our whole lives, that we should be living more aligned with the natural changes that occur during the season. I mean, you see this in nature. Bears hibernate in the winter, bees pollinate in spring, but as humans, we have the same routine. We do the same workouts all year round. We sleep at the same time. We wake up at the same time. We try to eat the same food because we like certain types of
Yeah.
food all
Yeah.
year round.
Yeah.
This isn't normal. You
Yeah.
know, the season is changing. The universe changes throughout the season. And so we need to make these shifts in our lives. And so right now we've actually entered the metal season, which is autumn. It may not feel like that, because we're still in August and we see August as still summer. But if you look out in nature, it's a little bit cooler. There's a little less daylight,
Mm.
right? And
Hmm.
so we need to make shifts like that. And so what I do during this time is I become a little bit more introverted. I don't go out as much. My workouts are a little bit less intense, whether it's frequency or endurance or intensity. It's a little less. Um, I'm I try to eat a little bit more of warm foods.
Mm.
You want to prepare your body for the fall and the cold winter, and so you need to make these little changes. I'm sleeping a little bit more in the summertime. I don't need a lot of sleep. There's so much energy, and I love the summer too. But I'm going out. I'm working out. I sleep
Yeah.
like 6 hours, which is crazy. But in the fall, I realized like, oh, I need to sleep a little bit more. I need to sleep
Mm.
like 7 hours. And then in the winter, sometimes it's 8, 9 hours. And
Yeah.
so working less a little bit or trying to work smart. It's hard to do that in this capitalistic society. We're
Hmm.
constantly on this hustle.
Yeah.
But the little changes really add up over time. And we love to do big changes. We love to
And
do
we
this
want it
big,
like immediately.
yeah,
It
right.
feels
We
like,
love the
yeah.
big glow up. We love the big
Yeah.
change, but it's these tiny little changes that add up.
Yeah. And it feels like that's so aligned to like perimenopause and menopausal. It's like a season of our life. It's a
Yeah.
season of our life. And I hear you really trying to encourage us to make changes, to listen to our body and to make changes aligned with the season of our life. How do you define rest physically, spiritually, mentally?
Rest is hard. It's something that I struggle to, especially
Yeah.
when you find a work that you love. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I now have a career that I actually love.
Yeah.
What I do tell my clients is there is a difference between rest and rejuvenation. And I think rest is something that our bodies will naturally do. When we're tired, we will collapse and we will rest. We go to sleep, we rest. But rejuvenation is something very different. And it's these little things that we do in our lives that spark us, that remind us why we're alive. Because I don't know if you've ever experienced where you do the rest, you go to sleep, you go to yoga, you do your meditation, and you still feel exhausted.
Tired. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And in Eastern medicine, we would say that it's because you're not doing something that's called rejuvenation. And
Mm.
rejuvenation, you don't need a lot of. It just has to be of high quality. It
Okay.
has to be intentional. Um, and that's it. That's it's very different for everyone.
Yeah.
But that little thing that sparks something in you that reminds you why you're alive. Like,
Mm.
what is the purpose of all of this? It could be eating a delicious chocolate cake, or it could be feeling the sand at the beach, something that makes you feel alive.
Mm. Absolutely. And and I'm wondering also, in addition to rejuvenation, if I'm feeling tired after I, do all of these activities that I think are supposed to make me feel more present. And here I go with my comparison again. Like someone told me that I'm supposed to feel better after yoga and I don't. I'm still exhausted. Is that an indication as well that something is out of balance? That I should go and pursue a rejuvenating activity, however big or small, or whatever is right for me.
Yeah,
Um,
it could be. I
yeah.
would say, like, before you try to fix it, before you try to
Oh,
figure out what to do next, to sit in that
okay.
space of unknown
Okay.
and to be curious and to ask and to listen to your body. Like, what are you trying to tell me? What's happening? Because it's not just so much about finding that thing that rejuvenates you. It's really understanding what is occurring in your body. How are you not aligned with what we would say your destiny of how are you living not aligned with nature?
Oh,
Because it could be something like completely different, like, maybe you're over giving because you've been taught to constantly give, and that is the only way that you receive love, is to constantly give, 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 and you've neglected yourself or you abandon yourself in that
yeah.
giving. So that's a whole other thing. And that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
going to the spa won't get to that deeper level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's really so profound about what you're saying, it feels as though like the wisdom of what to do, how to grow, how to redirect energy into something that maybe is more life-giving to you. It feels like that wisdom is actually coming from inside of you. it feels like a dramatically different message than what I learned growing up. Supposed to listen to the teacher, supposed to listen to this external, this voice or this commercial or this movie.
Yeah. I mean, even
And
when I
that's,
used to work with patients in clinic, I
yeah,
would always tell them, you're the expert of your own body.
holy
I
moly.
have the
Wow.
degree, I have the training.
Yeah.
That's what I'm coming in
Yeah.
for. But you are the expert. So we work together. We are equals. You tell me what's
Wow.
going on. I'll share what I know from my training, and
Yeah.
then you decide what you want to do. And I support you in this. Unfortunately,
That is not
taught to,
something we're
yeah,
taught at all.
yeah.
Like, I feel like women are not given that choice, or we are, if we choose. But I feel like we're told, like, that's not, no, this is what you need to be doing. So I want to talk about, Tamsin, envisioning a future where aging is sacred and power is internal and healing is community led. Um, how do you think we can shift from fear of aging to reverence for it? And what role will community play in this process of transformation during this time of perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Tell us what to do. Tell us
Right,
now.
right. You know what I'm gonna say. I You know what I find interesting when I look at what's happening in social media with aging? I feel like it's a very binary conversation. You can only age naturally, no Botox, no facial reconstruction, no hormones, or you can only do it this way: Botox, facelifts, everything, and it's like,
Mhm.
it's, I'm like, there has to be more to that. It can't just be one or the other.
Mm.
And when we think about the fear of aging, when I have this conversation with my friends and colleagues and clients, I'm always surprised that our fears are very different.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
thought my fear was something that everybody else felt.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's always surprising. So I think the first step is to understand that there is this fear of aging. We don't we don't really see that in media. Nobody talks about, there's a lot of fear of aging. We are getting closer to death. There's a
Yeah.
decline.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with ableism. We won't be able
Mhm.
to do a lot of things that we were able to do. And then for women, there is this factor of becoming invisible. I mean, that's my big fear of aging. It's
Mm.
not the loss of my youth or ability necessarily, but it's that in society, nobody will see me. I will
Mm.
become invisible. And that is so deeply painful. And so it's working with that fear and honoring it, because there is that wisdom. Like, what underneath my fear of being invisible, there has to be something else growing. So, not bypassing the feeling of fear, but actually going deeper and discovering that wisdom. There is something underneath that.
Yeah. That's so, like, again, I hear you saying just go into yourself and get curious about that fear.
Yeah,
And
it's not
why
easy.
it's
It's hard,
not easy. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Get a
And it's
good
painful.
therapist.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the community, uh, we in traditional cultures, this wasn't done alone. We didn't experience aging alone. We experienced it in a tribe, right? There
Mm.
was the tribe supported women getting older, because now they became the healers, they became the knowledge carriers, they became the wisdom carriers, they became the shamans. There was so much support, and those older women can support other women during that transition. But
Yeah.
now we don't have that. I,
Yeah.
I think we're seeing more of community led events.
Mm.
And so there is this need that we want to connect. And there's
Yeah.
something that happens. We
Mm.
do our healing when we're in relationship with other people.
Oh,
We can't do it alone.
yeah.
And so there is something beautiful that happens when you are in a group and you get to be witnessed, have people witness you, because it validates your experience. And then there's something incredible, which I really love, is to witnessing other people. You see the shift that happens in real time when
Mm.
they're sharing their story. And that to me is like incredible, And so it connects us to each other, and it connects us to something bigger, that there's more to this life than just what happens in our daily lives. But
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do this alone.
So as a teacher, we're talking about community, and there's something powerful about the support of a group, the discussion that happens. And again, I'm thinking about this purely from an education point of view, but the way in which you can support and see one another. And I even think about the principle you just taught us about how you think of yourself with your client as sort of on equal, it's a collaboration as opposed to me telling you what to do. And in the most powerful community teaching moments, it really is, it's not like the professor or the teacher, it's like the students helping to shape the knowledge in the room and to share their own learnings and to share sort of their own stories and the wisdom that you pull from the group. It's really important and powerful and beautiful, the learning that can come out of that. And to your point, no, you cannot do, it's really, really difficult to learn a new concept in isolation. There's a limit to what you can do with yourself, but when you are actually in community, it's a really powerful thing to be able to participate and experience. And how exponential, the discussion, the learning, and the support that can happen in community. Dr. Tamsin Lee, as we come to a close, I wonder if there was one thing you could say to your younger self about what's waiting on the other side of menopause, what would you say to her?
I think the biggest lesson that I'm trying to practice now is to just allowing myself the grace to be human,
Oh,
to be kind, to be tender, and be messy, you know, and um, and understand that uh, we all deserve that. I think sometimes we tend to try to focus on being kind to other people, and we neglect the kindness towards ourselves. And so just to allow myself to be a messy human being, make mistakes.
mm.
And that's really hard in this day and age where you're not allowed to make any mistakes and you have to be accountable for every mistake that you make. But practicing a bit more kindness to myself.
Wow, that was really beautiful. That's going to heal a lot. And I'm going to selfishly say that just healed something in me.
Yeah.
Um, what is one truth you want every listener, especially Asian women, to carry with them after hearing this conversation?
You have the blood of your ancestors running through you.
Mm,
And in Chinese medicine, we say blood holds memory. And so, even if you're disconnected from your culture, even if you are part of a diaspora or you were adopted, so disconnected from the land and the culture, the blood still runs through you. So, that cosmic wisdom still runs through you.
mm,
Just listen. You'll find yourself being drawn to certain things and not knowing why. Listen to that. Be curious about that. Connect with the wisdom. I think being in diaspora or being, first gen, second generation, when you live so far away, and maybe some of us don't even speak the language of our culture, we feel so disconnected. But the blood runs, so the memory runs through our body. In any way that you can connect with the culture, food is the best way to connect with the culture. Food
mm,
has energy. Eating the food from your culture, it will spark those memories.
mm.
So don't feel like you're not part of it because there is this disconnection. You are very much part of it.
Thank you for that. And thank you for reminding us again. I feel like I hear from you just constantly to be connected to yourself, to trust. There's a level, the deep level of self-trust that, I mean, we mentioned therapy, man, that I am really learning that lesson hardcore right
Yeah.
now. That is so hard. Because
Yeah.
I pull everybody. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do, but I have just heard you say time and time again throughout this conversation that women need to trust themselves, what's happening inside of their body. There is nothing wrong with us. It's a message. It's an opportunity for me to think about an aspect of my life or my life in general. And I can't tell you how empowering and how grateful I am. What a relief, Jesus, what a relief to know that, wow, I have the power to actually shift this trajectory to do something about
Yes.
it if I choose to, or to sit with it. I mean, wow, this is a powerful learning I'm walking away with, at least. So I thank you for that. I would love to actually give you the opportunity to share.
Yeah, our biggest project is, so I have a podcast where we talk more about beauty and aging and metaphysics, and it's called Beauty as a Birthright. And I co-host it with my colleague, Dr. Paige Yang, who is of Chinese descent, and she has this incredible gua sha brand called Yang Face.
Dr. Tamsin Lee, I just want to thank you so much for such an enlightening conversation. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Courage Class. I hope today's conversation gave you a little encouragement and inspiration. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And for extra motivation, tools, and behind-the-scenes content, sign up for my newsletter. I'd love to share with you more there. See you next time.